All right, so another day and another recorded lecture by me. However, I will say this. This theory right here, Kristallers central place theory, is like, and I can't explain why, is the theory that most of my geeky human geography teacher online friends geek out about the most. I don't know why, but like there's always a prediction that this is going to be an FRQ. It's the hexagon theory. Anytime my teacher friends see this like in the real life, they'll like post a picture of it. So I don't know, like a pillow at Target, they'll post a picture of it and just be like, it's Kristallers. Eh, it's fine, the theory, but it is, I will say this, Kristallers is to the urban unit, like Weber is to industry, or von Thunen is to agriculture. So this one's pretty important. So enough of the introduction. Let me talk to you a little bit about the theory. Okay, so before we actually get into the theory, it is important that you understand the concepts threshold and range. I know that the short reading that I had you complete gave you the definition of these, but this is sort of the foundation of the entire theory. So I'm going to go through it and kind of explain it in my own words too. Okay, so threshold. So you can see here's the hexagon, that's the whole theory. Threshold is this idea that there is living in this area in the hinterland, that there needs to be a certain number of people for every service or good that's being provided. Okay, so like we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but there's a minimum number of people that needs to support whatever the central function is. And these like little circles are the central place. And within the central place, we could be talking about something as small as like a newspaper stand or something as large as like a mega city. But the idea here is that there are some sort of goods or services that are being provided, and there needs to be a bare number of people who are willing to buy those goods and services. Otherwise, this node here will just cease to exist. And then there's the other concept, which is range. Now, range is the distance that a person might be willing to travel to get this particular service. So you can imagine that if you are buying gas, the range is like much smaller. Or if you're going to Starbucks, there's like a Starbucks in every block. It seems like in a major city that the range is going to be much smaller. But if you are having open heart surgery or brain surgery, you probably would be willing to travel a much, much further distance. And your activity today, how you're going to demonstrate your learning, is about range and threshold. So I'll be able to kind of see if you need more support with this after you finish the activity. Okay, so Kristallers central place theory. Let me tell you about this guy. So Walter Kristaller is the person who came up with this theory. And he developed the theory to explain the distribution of cities of different sizes across a region. So this theory gets a little bit wacky, but I'm going to do my best to try and simplify it. And there's also another video that is not my voice, a YouTube video by a geographer who I really admire, is also linked to the agenda for this week. Okay, so he argues that there is a market area that surrounds each central place. So this is the hinterland. This is what we were just talking about on the last slide. And you can see like this would be range, and then within here is threshold, for which, okay, so the market area provides goods and services. It needs a certain population. And there are a few assumptions here. Like every good model, there's always a few assumptions, which makes the model imperfect, but still logical. So Kristaller says that goods are generally purchased from the closest place that they're offered. So unless you're like really bargain shopping, if you need gas, for example, you're just going to stop at the first gas station you see. If you would like a cup of coffee, you're not going to drive to a coffee shop across town. You're going to go to the coffee shop that's closest. He also says that physical geography does not limit the distribution of goods. So this is kind of going back to von Thunen a little bit, this idea of an isotropic plane. So there's no like, everything's just flat and easy to get to and so on and so forth. So he makes that as an assumption as well. And then he also makes the assumption that resources and people are evenly distributed. And you know that that is not the case. Now, oh no, there's a hat that shows up Chris Dollar, I can only imagine that is, again, because of Mr. Baustein, who likes to decorate people in his presentations. Okay, so continuing on. So Chris Dollar answers this question. So what determines which services are available and how far apart should central areas be located? Okay, so I kind of lied a little bit. Like I do actually really like this theory because just like hotellings, there's this like, I don't know, why is there a CVS and a Walgreens right next to each other? Why are there two gas stations right next to each other? Central Place is pretty helpful in like sort of logically understanding travel. So for example, I travel down Randall Road to get to school. Now there is a Meijer that is in, I think that would be South Elgin. And on Randall Road, South Elgin, I keep going north, until I hit Algonquin, and there is another Meijer. So the range and threshold between those two stores have basically been decided for me. So that's about how far apart a Meijer can be from another Meijer, given the amount of people that will visit that Meijer and the distance that people are willing to travel. So I actually would pass by both. That's how far away I live from school, I guess. So it's a helpful theory in determining where goods and services are placed. So then each center of the circle is a node or a market, and I already kind of explained this. So this could be like a really small market, or it could be like a really big market. From newspaper stand to mega city. So you get the gist. Now, again, every central place has a threshold and a range, but it also has a function or goods and services that are offered. So there are two kinds of functions that we can look at. We can look at higher order functions and lower order functions. So higher order functions are high value and infrequent demand, and they tend to have a really long range. So you guys might think about this in terms of fashion, right? Imagine a Target versus a Gucci store, right? So Gucci would be higher order, and then Target would be lower order. So less value, but more frequent demand. And so these tend to have shorter ranges. And the same can be true, same can be said about Target, actually. Target, there's a Target like right in South Elgin, and then there's another Target just a little bit further north of that, and then there's another Target right by the Meijer where I live. So actually, I pass 3 Targets on the way home from school to my house. So again, that kind of tells you a little bit about the range and threshold for a Target. People visit Target more than Meijer, I guess. Okay, so here's another way that you can look at higher order and lower order, like if we're talking about functions themselves. So higher order and lower order, like the lowest order really down here is the gas station, and then you might have the convenience store, and then so you're going to have the most people visiting here, so it's going to have the shortest range, and then you kind of keep going up. You increase the range, and you're going to have to increase the threshold, right? So like you're not going to have, if we look up here, a sports stadium. So you've got the Kane County Cougars that serves obviously Kane County, but they're not obviously major league or a baseball team that's going to draw a huge crowd from outside of Kane County. So you might have major league sports stadiums, the vast majority of them located in cities. So you've got 2 in the city of Chicago. You've got the Cubs and the White Sox. So you're not going to have like the Kane County Cougars necessarily drawing giant crowds. So they're going to be, somewhere down here in terms of range and threshold. And these are going to be your higher order goods, of course. All right. So and I think, honestly, I think that this is the reason why so many teachers like Chris Dollars, because this is like I don't know if you guys have ever seen like those Russian nesting dolls, where you keep opening them and the dolls just keep getting smaller and smaller and it feels like it's never going to end. So that's kind of like what Chris Dollar does. He just sort of nests all these hexagons on top of one another. So you're going to see like these big nodes or these central places, the ones that are the largest, they call them first order. So the range and the threshold is going to be the biggest for these first order ones, right? So this is going to have the most services, the most goods, the most high order functions, and so on and so forth. And then you can see like second would be here, and you can see like the markets are a little bit smaller, the range and threshold is a little bit smaller. third order even smaller than that. So then this would be the range and threshold. And then you've got like these like teeny little, I don't know, maybe these are like towns or hamlets or whatever. So there's a gas station, a convenience store, maybe a place to wash your clothes, whatever. So the fewest number of goods and services are provided. But what's kind of fun is then you see, like, if we're looking at this, so let's imagine that this is a major city, New York, Chicago, LA. You've got all of these surrounding areas that are served by this particular area too. So there's going to be some overlap. Like there's going to be a Starbucks in Chicago, and there's probably going to be a Starbucks here. Let's say that this is Naperville, and there's probably going to be a Starbucks down here. I don't know, smaller. Maybe this is Batavia. So you can see how there's some overlap between the services that are provided and the goods. But the larger the central place, just the bigger the range and the threshold for the goods and services that are provided within those areas. Okay, so just so that you can see this in real life, when businesses are deciding, just like when industry for Weber is deciding where to locate, they need to think about how they're going to earn money, right? So like you'd want to locate in the right place, even if we're talking about McDonald's, because if you don't have a large enough threshold to support the business, or if you're too close to another McDonald's, then the potential for you closing down is very real. So consumer businesses, they have to think about where to locate. They got to think about the market area or the hinterland. They got to think about who's coming. They have to think about the range and the threshold as well. So I like normally I would do this in class with you guys. Like I would show this to you and I'd be like, all right, let's apply central place theory. So I want you to draw hexagons around the McDonald's in your area. And you can see like, this is what I love. I love to show you, so this is Route 64. This is right in St. Charles, and there's a McDonald's, and you can see traveling. There's McDonald's, and there's McDonald's, and there's McDonald's. And if you notice, like it's pretty equidistant. Like they're not that far apart, or they're around the same distance from one another. And like even here you can kind of see, and here you can kind of see, like there was some thought into the placement of these McDonald's, considering those three factors that I just showed you on the previous slide. So like hinterland and range and threshold and so on and so forth. So if we were at school, I would be like, draw your hexagons, and then I would show you this. And then you can actually see in real time that like, it's not perfect, right? I mean, it's close, but Chris Dollar's really, you can see like the evidence of like how his model is fairly accurate. So if you look at my hexagons, then you'll see that the market areas are around the same size. I should say this, like if you see McDonald's that are closer together, then what you need to assume between these McDonald's versus these McDonald's, that like there's a smaller population between these two McDonald's, which is why they're further apart from one another. The larger the population, the closer the McDonald's can be, because right, if you're like splitting up the threshold, the number of people that are visiting each one of these McDonald's, if you have population density that's higher between these two McDonald's, they can actually be closer, versus population density between these two McDonald's, not as close. And you can actually even see that, like looking at the connectivity of the roads, like there's just not a lot going on here on Route 59, right? So like it makes sense that they wouldn't have McDonald's along these ways, because there wouldn't be enough people to sort of stop and have McDonald's there. The other thing that you can consider, so if you were a geographer and you were hired by McDonald's to figure out like where should the next McDonald's be located, like probably here somewhere, right? Like this is the area on the map that seems to be lacking. So maybe that's a place, given of course the population size, that might be the next place to build a McDonald's. And then I kind of like gave it away already, but this idea of transportation routes influencing where people would stop. A lot of these fast food restaurants, a lot of gas stations, Starbucks, whatever, stores, they're almost always located along major routes, like transportation routes, which sort of makes sense because these yellow roads right here are going to be traveled far more often than say these like smaller white roads here. So again, you're increasing the range and threshold just by building along a larger road. And then there are other factors as to why people might stop. Um, Like if you are an area that has a high density of businesses, you'll probably do better by putting McDonald's closer together, or I don't know, there's a variety of other things that could influence um, where people would stop and have McDonald's. So I hope this was helpful. I really do encourage you to watch the other video that is not me talking that's linked to the agenda for this week, because again, Dan Snyder, the guy who does the video, he's like really smart, and he has a great way of explaining central place theory as well. So yeah, there you go. I hope you enjoyed. I miss your faces. I don't like just talking to a computer. This is not fun. All right, bye guys.